Hi, I'm Nick Palmisano.
Und ich bin Mike Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. This week sucked. Matt and I didn't even want to write the news this week because frankly, there's nothing good happening right now. To make matters worse, the press has not even attempted to report the facts of the events that have now purged America once again into a debate that is completely bereft of any empathy. I don't think either terrible situation is as cut and dry as everyone is making it seem, and given that, it's more important than ever that we try to simply report the facts. The number of "if you think this, then unfriend me" messages on social media has gone through the roof. So naturally, Matt and I have to try to get unfriended by all of you. Here goes. What we actually know about Jacob Blake's shooting. There were no body cams. They were approved for use in 2017, but the police department held off on implementing them. So for all of this, we only have grainy footage from cell phone cameras of onlookers to go by. I know I said I would try to keep my opinion out of this, and I know it's the very first thought on the entire thing, but in this day and age, it's really stupid for police departments not to have body cams. It protects everyone involved. They're not that expensive, and storage is as cheap as it's ever been for data. The town allegedly held off because of the price tag. Well, now the price tag is their entire town is burning, and the entire country is having a war of words that is getting more and more dangerous every day. Back to the event. In time sequential order, the first thing that we know that happened is a neighbor saw Mr. Blake come up in front of the house and tell his son to get inside the vehicle. He then entered the home of his ex-girlfriend. Mr. Blake was not breaking up a fight as initially reported. The mother of 3 of his children had called the police to let them know that Mr. Blake was not supposed to be on the premises and that he had grabbed the keys to her vehicle. She called the police because in July of this year, she reported and he was charged and arrested for third-degree sexual assault. There's a popular meme going around right now that juxtaposes Blake's actual charges against the Rhode Island statute for third-degree sexual assault. The Rhode Island statute essentially amounts to sex with a minor. Mr. Blake did not do that. His alleged crime, and we have to say alleged because at this point Mr. Blake has not pled in either way for the crime, and he has not had a trial. His alleged crime was breaking into his ex-girlfriend's house, wrecking the place, and then raping her. He then allegedly stole her wallet and withdrew $500 from her debit card twice before police found him and arrested him. None of this means that he should be shot. There's just so much bad information out there about this case that we are going to attempt to clarify everything. So what the police know upon arrival is that this guy is charged with assault and rape of this same woman and is on the premises with her keys. By the time they arrive, he has the children in the vehicle and is preparing to leave. Again, he's not allowed to be around the ex-girlfriend or the children because of his restraining order. The police then approach him and attempt to arrest him. This almost immediately turns into a physical altercation. The male officer who ultimately ends up shooting him and his female partner are unable to subdue him. They end up in a skirmish against the car, and the male officer attempts to put Blake in a headlock. Blake works his way out of the headlock and manages to get to his feet. Before you even say it, yes, it would be great if these officers had even a semblance of basic hand-to-hand combat, but we've beaten that message into the ground so many times before that I will spare you. The female officer then deploys her taser and hits him with it, but he just brushes it off as if nothing happened. As he breaks free, Blake begins walking around the vehicle. There are reports by the police that at this point he announces that he has a knife. However, there's nothing in the video at this point that shows it. There are also claims that he is holding a knife. We've watched the video about 50 times. We've watched it at 1/4 speed. We've paused it. It does not look like it's a knife. It looks like it's his hand at a weird angle. That being said, it is possible that he's carrying a knife. We just don't think that's the case. Also, he did not have the knife during the initial altercation. So if he pulled it from somewhere, it would have been from his mesh shorts. As a fellow lover of mesh shorts, they're not really good for holding sharp things. At this point, Blake begins to walk around the car and the officer draws his weapon and begins following him. When Blake gets to the door of his car, the officer reaches out with his left hand and attempts to turn him away from the door. Blake easily brushes that off. Blake then reaches for the floor of his car. Let's get this out of the way. No, Mr. Blake should not have been there. No, Mr. Blake should not have fought the police. No, Mr. Blake should not have reached into his vehicle given the situation that he was in. The fundamental question is, should Mr. Blake have been shot? Whenever we report on these situations, Matt and I try to put ourselves in the position of the officers or the position of the victims. Matt and I have basically been doing combat sports since we were born, so the idea of not being able to subdue this guy who clearly isn't trained isn't even something that we would consider. So we have to imagine ourselves in a position where we have no training similar to this officer. So now, if you're the officer on scene, you know this guy just beat you and your partner in a fight. He just brushed off the taser. He's got to the vehicle. He's reaching in for something and you don't know what it is. What do you do? We reached out to a couple of officers about the use of force continuum here because, honestly, we didn't know the answer. They both told me, you can't let him leave with the kids. And this is where it all gets ugly. The more training and the more ability you have, the more options you have, and maybe the longer you can let this play out to make sure that you end it the way you want to. If the cops could have de-escalated, this whole thing ends before it even begins. But de-escalation is a two-way street, and we don't have any idea what happened in terms of conversation before this thing got violent. The first video starts with violence. You know what would be really helpful to figure out what happened at the beginning of this? Body cams. If either police officer could fight, this whole thing ends in an arrest and doesn't escalate to the level it did. But they couldn't fight. If the taser had worked, they would have been able to control the situation. But it didn't. We can game the rest, and we have. We spent a ton of time talking about this. What would we do? The officers could have tackled him from behind. They could have deployed another taser. They could have hit him with batons. They could have placed themselves between the door of the vehicle and the man. But once he gets to the door, what do? Can you let him drive away with the kids? How long do you wait to see what he's reaching for? What if it's a gun? I'm not justifying what happened, and I don't think this is an example of exemplary police work. I think, in the words of one of the police officers that I spoke with, if you're a cop, you have an obligation to have more tools than the ones on your tool belt. Because if all you have is your tool belt, that's all you're going to use to solve the situation. I'm just asking you the question. What do? Imagine the guy that you're trying to arrest is Tim Kennedy, or Chuck Liddell, or John Jones, or George St. Pierre. He just kicked your ass. He just laughed off your taser. Now he's going to the vehicle to grab something. I don't have a good answer for you. I really don't think that I'm pulling the trigger at that point. But I wasn't there. I wasn't involved in that stressful situation. And I don't really know what I would do. And probably neither do you. One thing is for sure though, if he doesn't pull the trigger, and that guy goes and hurts those kids, or worse, everyone would be asking that officer why he didn't pull the trigger. I know I probably just raised more questions than I did answers, but I think we'd all be better off spending more time thinking about things than rushing to answers. I know no one wants to hear that, but that's as straight as I can call it. Here's another one that sucks. After the shooting of Mr. Blake, all hell broke loose in Kenosha, and rioters basically burned down an entire section of the town. So a 17-year-old kid, who was apparently a police supporter, asked his mom to drive him 25 minutes to the site so he could meet up with some online adult friends that he has in order to protect the town from rioters. He does this armed with an AR-15. It is illegal to possess or own an AR-15 if you're under the age of 18 in Illinois. So let's start with all of those problems. First, he instantly broke the law and likely committed a felony by showing up and brandishing a weapon under the age of 18. Second, who the f*** drives their 17-year-old kid to a riot with an AR-15 and says, "Have fun, honey"? She's going to get sued and will likely be charged as well. Never mind a child doing it. If I had a 30-year-old kid that was like, "Hey dad, I'm gonna grab my AR-15 and go check out this riot and see what's going on," I would say, "No, you are not." And if he then ignored me, I would play my favorite child-rearing game called Everyone Loves a Cradle, which for you uncultured swine is a wrestling move where you basically have the child eating their own knee. You can hold this for whatever time you deem necessary. In this instance, it would be quite some time. I'm very selfish when it comes to my life or the lives of my family. I think protesting is great. I think riots are stupid. But unless the riot shows up literally at my front door and starts trying to burn down my house, I'm not engaging with the rioters. Why? Because I don't want my family to be hurt. I don't want to get killed and then leave my family with the financial and emotional aftermath of that, and I don't want to shoot anyone. And when you're open carrying a weapon in a volatile environment, the chances of shooting someone increase significantly. If I want to put myself in harm's way, then I will join law enforcement or go back to the military. Right now, I just want to hang out with my wife and kids, occasionally drink whiskey with Matt, and watch season 2 of The Boys when it comes out next week. I digress. So the dumbest mom ever drives her 17-year-old illegally across state lines with a weapon that he cannot hold and drops him off and says good luck. Or maybe she stays. There are rumors that she's part of the militia and she stayed, and there are rumors that she drove home. We don't know for sure yet, so it's either way, she left a kid with a gun in a riot. Dumb. She is my least favorite person in this whole thing. Parents, your job is to create productive members of society that are not. This is not the way to do that. So anyway, this kid spends the day cleaning up, painting over graffiti, and picking up garbage off the ground. No issue there. He then talks earnestly about how it's his job to defend the town. It sounds nice, but it is not. It is not his job. He is a kid. It is the police force's job. It is the National Guard's job. It's his job to graduate high school and plan for the future. So we're starting on very bad footing. Over the course of the day, the group he's with has a very cordial relationship with the police force. The cops have already taken a lot of heat for this, but I do understand how they arrive at this place, right or wrong. You have one group that wants you dead, and that's not an exaggeration. This very week, rioters tried to trap Seattle police inside their precinct and burn it to the ground. And you have another group that supports you. And even if that isn't the case, the police are not supposed to escalate things. So if people are generally being nice to them, they are generally nice in return. But they probably did favor the group. We're all human. You have to be extremely disciplined not to favor the group that doesn't want you to die. Anyway, the entire day was pretty uneventful. Rittenhouse decided to leave the group briefly, either to go check something out or to go to a nearby corner store. At that point, rioters kicked off a few blocks away from the militia's location, and police arrived at the scene, essentially cutting him off from his group. This was all confirmed by the New York Times that did a very impressive analysis of street cams and phone footage to piece together the entire sequence of events. Rittenhouse attempts to get back to the militia, but the police stop him, thinking he's part of the rioters. So now he's essentially cut off from his group. Some of the rioters notice this and start heckling him and threatening him almost immediately. Rittenhouse then tries to get away and flee the environment because he can see that it's getting out of hand. Here he encounters Joseph Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum immediately gets extremely aggressive with him and swears, screams, and threatens him, even screaming, "Shoot me, N-word," over and over again. Rosenbaum begins closing the distance and Rittenhouse goes to run away. As he's turning to run, a shot goes off. This is caught on camera. It doesn't come from Rittenhouse or Rosenbaum, but Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old that is in a kinetic environment for the first time in his life, probably thinks he's being shot at from Rosenbaum. Rittenhouse then spins to assess the threat just as Rosenbaum is throwing something at him. A lot of people initially said it was a Molotov cocktail. Now it sounds like it was a brick or a rock in a bag. Rittenhouse then fires, hitting Rosenbaum in the head, killing him. Rittenhouse then moves to Rosenbaum to check on him. He sees that he's shot in the head and immediately gets on the phone to call somebody, maybe 911, maybe a friend or family member, and says, "I think I just killed a guy." As he's trying to report this to whoever, a crowd is starting to form near him, threatening him and screaming at him, and he decides to take off because danger seems imminent. There were reports that Rosenbaum is a sex offender. There are many websites saying this. However, we have not yet corroborated this with a source that we trust. So at this point, we are going to say that that is not true. So now everything picks up at the very famous footage of Rittenhouse running away from a crowd. He trips, and this gives the crowd the chance to attack him, which they do. Anthony Huber hits him over the head with a skateboard, while another man leaps into the air and kicks him in the face and then runs off. At this point, Rittenhouse is reeling from 2 headshots and rolls over in time to see Huber standing over him and fires off a shot that hits him center of mass. By the speed in which Huber collapses, it's very clear that it was a shot directly to the heart or very close to it. Gage Grosskreutz, who was at a full sprint coming at Rittenhouse holding a Glock 19, pauses when he sees Huber get shot and throws his hands up in the air. At that point, Rittenhouse stops, weapon still trained on him, but does not pull the trigger because it looks like he's going to retreat. He then changes his mind and accelerates towards the 17-year-old, who then pulls the trigger, hitting him in the bicep. Grosskreutz then screams for a medic while wearing a medic hat, and someone else screams, "Call the police," both of which seem somewhat ironic given the situation. There are reports out there that Huber and Grosskreutz are convicted felons, one for strangulation and domestic abuse, the other for burglary and assault. We found these reports posted on multiple sites, but at this point in time, we don't have enough information to corroborate that they are true. Likewise, we found reports that Rittenhouse had been in trouble for marijuana possession and alcohol consumption. Similarly, we could not confirm these charges. There were also reports that Rittenhouse is a white supremacist, and these reports came from some pretty hefty news sites. The problem is that we found nothing that corroborates that. There's nothing in his social media, there's nothing in his interviews, there's nothing from friends and family, and even his victims were white. I searched for hours and found nothing, so I don't know exactly where this came from. Rittenhouse has now been arrested and he's been charged with many things, but the big one is first-degree murder. It doesn't get much bigger than that. They're essentially saying that he planned to commit murder, showed up, and executed his plan. People have very strong opinions about this, but there's 2 things that you really have to look at. What was his intent and plan when he arrived on scene, and then what did he actually do? If you look at the shootings themselves, bereft of any initial intent, it looks very much like self-defense. Rittenhouse did not initiate any of the attacks. In the first scenario, he was getting run down by an adult that was threatening to attack him. A shot, confirmed by the New York Times, did go off. Rittenhouse does appear to react to that, and I personally believe that he thought Rosenbaum was shooting at him. Later, he was attacked by a mob, was hit twice in the head, including by a weapon, and saw another man running at him with a gun. He shot the guy that was beating him with a skateboard. Then he gave the guy with a gun a chance to withdraw. That guy opted not to. Then he shot him. Where the whole case comes down to, however, and where I think the DA is going to beat him up pretty hard, is on intent. In the same way that people are going to ask the question, why didn't Blake comply with the police officers? You have to ask the question, why did you drive 25 minutes to be involved in this riot? Why did you, as a minor, illegally have this weapon and brandish it? Why did you decide it was up to you to protect this town? Why did you not think that inserting a weapon into a volatile environment was going to do anything other than escalate things? The DA is going to be trying to prove that Rittenhouse went into that town trying to throw down, trying to be a vigilante, trying to shoot somebody. And it's going to come down to whether or not the jury thinks that this was just a silly kid doing something stupid, or whether they think that this was a person that was bent on doing harm to other people. But as always, what's really interesting to me is that we have 2 sides that are supremely confident in their own opinion and are not considering anything else. One side is saying this kid should be charged as an adult and put to death or spend life in prison. The other side is saying that he's some kind of hero fighting back. And to me, both of these positions are absolutely insane. Once again, that was my opinion. I tried to keep it out of there, but there it is. I don't think the shooter or the victims were the good guys in this incident. And frankly, the longer we do this show, the more I absolutely loathe the sensationalism associated with the media, because it just sets everybody up to suckle off the poison of their teat. And yes, I just wanted to say teat. And I'll say it again, teat. Teat, teat, teat. But there's so much more that has been reported, and reported by major news sites, that simply has no veracity, but yet it's been said over and over again, and its whole purpose is to enrage you and get you to click. Every honest journalist, and there are many, and I can't say it enough, that New York Times analysis was so good. It was so honest. It was excellent reporting, and it was very obvious that a ton of work had gone into it. But for every honest journalist, there's at least 10 that are full of shit and just want to get you to click their bullshit. So there it is. Many hours of Matt and I going through video, going through articles, going through police records, going through the sex offender database, going through mugshots, and here's our analysis. You're going to have to make this decision for yourself, but no matter what, it all sucks.
This week was the Republican National Convention, and much like the Democratic National Convention, had a lot of people giving some canned speeches, a few people standing out as awesome, and then some scary. First, the good. Ivanka Trump had a good showing. A lot of people hate on her, but she had a compelling and approachable speech. She also used language that may open the door for her running in the future. 2024 might be off the chain. Nikki Haley also did extremely well. She gave one of the more inclusive speeches and tried to distance the Republican Party from the Democratic calls of racism. She also sounds very much like the frontrunner for the 2024 presidential run. Sean Parnell also had a great showing for his first national outing. He sounded very much like the Republicans of old, calling for a united country and crossing the aisle for the success of a nation. He also called for Democrats disillusioned with the current state of their party to vote Republican. In full disclosure, we know Sean, so we're a little biased. And he did abandon Nick at a party once in D.C., making him a terrible wingman, but we still think he did a pretty good job at the speeches. Tim Scott kicked. He was our pick for best speech. He struck a tone of optimism. He was relatable, and his discussion of his family's history from cotton to Congress was compelling. He's the third emerging star for the next presidential election. Andrew Polak, the father of a teen who was gunned down at Parkland, gave a very compelling speech saying that he didn't believe that more gun control would have helped the kids there. It didn't feel in any way staged and lent it a lot of credence. Now the bad. Charlie Kirk. Kirk said that if Trump lost, civilization as we know it would end. We're just going to stop our analysis right there. The Hatch Act. You're not supposed to mix campaigning and official duties. That got thrown right out the window. Basically, every aspect of the RNC held right there on the White House lawn was in direct violation of that. The arbiter, of course, is the DOJ, unless Congress decides to impeach again, which they won't, so this whole thing is moot. But it will give the Democrats a little bit of firepower going into the elections. On to the ugly. The McCloskeys. Now I know what you're thinking. If only we could get those lawyers who were brandishing weapons poorly and became ultimate meme fodder to speak, we'd really have something. Turns out we did not. This was a bad idea. Kimberly Guilfoyle. Holy sh**. So much yelling. Why are you yelling? This was terrifying. I'm still scared. Stop yelling.
Hurricane Laura has been downgraded to a tropical storm. The massive storm hit land as a Category 4 hurricane, but since it hit landfall, it has slowed considerably. According to reports, Louisiana and the Texas coast have taken a beating. However, East Texas has remained largely unscathed, which is great news. We'll report more on this next week as information comes in. Until then, stay safe, people.
Earlier this month, the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals threw out a California ban on high-capacity magazines, calling it unconstitutional. Appellate Judge Kenneth Lee explains that while he understands why the ban was created, it doesn't justify creating a sweeping ban that would basically make half the magazines in the entire nation illegal. The ruling has the potential to have a larger effect as it disagrees with 6 other rulings in federal appellate courts across the country. Right now, though, it's too soon to tell whether it'll have an effect on other such bans, like in Massachusetts or New Jersey. Second Amendment supporters say this is a huge step in the right direction. Anti-gun advocates are calling the ruling dangerous and are confident it'll be overturned. They continue to use the argument that the Second Amendment doesn't empower U.S. citizens to arm themselves with weapons of war, even though that's exactly what the Second Amendment empowers American citizens to do since its conception. This week, the Coast Guard were doing drills in the water when suddenly a shark decided it wanted to join in. One of their buddies, who was overseeing the drills, decided to jump in with his AR and stop the shark, literally pulling his friends from the jaws of death.
Dutch Foreign Minister Stef Block spoke to Chinese diplomat Wang Yi this week to basically tell him the world is tired of your shit. He specifically mentioned the Hong Kong arrests of journalists and politicians, the change in national security law, and the postponement of Hong Kong elections. He also raised the constant persecution of Muslims, Christians, and the Tibetan Buddhists. The Dutch stated that they wanted to make it clear that while they want to work with China, they will not tolerate the constant abuse of human rights. What this means as of now is unclear, but it's good news that officials from other governments are beginning to speak up. For their part, China blames the United States.
Wildfires have been raging across the western states. 93 wildfires have burned more than 1.8 million acres in 14 states. In California, the state has been getting hit with multiple lightning strikes in dry weather, which have caused so many of these fires. Firefighters said that this week they received a little bit of help from nature with humidity and low winds. Still, 1.25 million acres in California have been burned in just 2 weeks. Residents expressed their anger at the wildfires, saying they were heated. Yeah, that was gross. I'm sorry. It burned coming out. We'll report more on these later as the situation unfolds. Nancy Pelosi announced this week that she doesn't think Joe Biden should debate Donald Trump. Yeah, that'll help you.
For more foreign news this week, the Berlin hospital treating Putin opposition leader Alexei Navalny confirmed that he was in fact poisoned with nerve agent. Initially hospitalized in Siberia, Russian doctors refused to let Alexei leave at first because they said his condition prohibited it. Alexei's own doctor was able to get him moved to a German hospital and later said that he believes that the Russian doctors were trying to keep him there long enough for the nerve agent to work itself out of his system. As of right now, Navalny is still in a coma in a German hospital, and the probability of his recovery is unknown. Now, some people think that Putin is behind all this, but he denied involvement. And just because this year he removed term limits and essentially made him the supreme leader of Russia for life, it doesn't mean that he had anything to do with this. It was probably just some kid that was playing with nerve agent and accidentally dropped it in Alexei's drink.
The Virginia Senate voted Wednesday to pass a bill downgrading assaulting an officer to a simple misdemeanor. According to reports, the bill eliminates the mandatory time served for assaulting a judge, a magistrate, a law enforcement officer, a correctional officer, a firefighter, or an EMS attendant. It is no longer classified as an assault unless it causes bodily injury. The mandatory minimum 6-month jail sentence for assaulting an officer will also be rescinded. Well, look, before you get all up in arms about this, let's just consider giving it a try. Hear me out. We just do it with one extra provision. You just include mayors, governors, reps, senators, basically anyone in office who voted for this bill in the definition. You make it, you eat it. Let's give it a shot. The players in the NBA decided to walk out on the rest of their season in protest. When the NBA owners informed them that they will be getting only a portion of their salaries for not playing, the NBA players decided to walk out on their protest and begin playing again.
This week, a man in Hong Kong contracted the coronavirus for the second time. The Hong Kong local got the virus initially in late March with symptoms, but this time around he's asymptomatic. It's hard to make a call based off of a sample size of 1, but researchers initially think that this means that the coronavirus antibodies only last for a few months, but that the antibodies will lessen the effects of the disease if you get it a second or third time. It's unclear what will come of this news, but we expect that China will declare a new state of emergency in Hong Kong and wipe out all pro-democracy supporters in order to get ahead of things and flatten the second curve.
Google has recently thrown down the gauntlet to the higher education system. The company announced this month that they will be launching their own career certification program. The program will offer skills training for a low price and will be viewed the same as a 4-year degree. Each certificate will take 6 months to complete and will cost as much as most university students spend on books. Apart from Google, some other big-name companies are on board with hiring other certificate graduates. These are companies like Walmart, Best Buy, Intel, and Bank of America. Senior Vice President of Global Affairs at Google, Kent Walker, said that a 4-year degree is out of reach for a lot of Americans, and that shouldn't be the only means to financial security. And in order to provide the full college experience, each certification will come with an option to join a fraternity or sorority.
On August 14th, James A. Cotton, a member of the Tuskegee Airman 332nd Fighter Group, passed away at the age of 93. Mr. Cotton joined the all-black Air Force unit at the age of 18. He became the Air Operations Non-Commissioned Officer for the 334th Interceptor Squadron in 1949. He is survived by his wife of 73 years, Eteria, 10 children, 15 grandchildren, 21 great-grandchildren, and 2 great-great-grandchildren. To Mr. James Cotton, fair wind, sir.
Bella Thorne, an ex-Disney actress, broke the internet this week when she created her own OnlyFans account and earned $1 million in 24 hours. She was so popular that the site apparently crashed. In related news, based on this data and that kind of ROI, Nick and I will be creating our own OnlyFans account where we basically just sit around drinking, talking shit about other OnlyFans accounts and how much lamer they are than us. We'll start with Bella Thorne because we don't actually know who she is.
Gravity Payments CEO Dan Price released disturbing statistics about American business. His company primarily helps small businesses process credit cards. He posted that big box retailers absolutely crushed the past quarter. Amazon profits are up 100%. Walmart profits are up 80%. Target profits are up 80%. Lowe's profits are up 74%. Meanwhile, 21% of all of his small business clients have closed forever, and small business as a whole is down 30%. Without question, the government policies that shut down small businesses across the country, while somehow deeming all of these large businesses essential, has completely shifted the wealth of the country. Many economists and financial experts are saying this is one of the biggest wealth exchanges in American history. Jeff Bezos' net worth is up to $200 billion. I'm not saying he should be taxed more. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve the money he's made. But I am saying that the government, whether on purpose or inadvertently, just stacked the deck in favor of people that already have the most money ever in human history. And that if we want to change that in any meaningful way, we have to make the decision to spend more money on small businesses. If you can, buy local. See if there are alternatives to spending on Amazon or Walmart or Target. I'm not against these places, but it's getting goddamn ridiculous. Basically, we're approaching that place in Demolition Man where everything is Taco Bell.
The next story is very personal to me as I spent many years of my life in counter-human trafficking operations. U.S. Marshals, in conjunction with state and local authorities, rescued 26 children and located another 13 in an operation called Operation Not Forgotten. According to reports, the children's ages ranged anywhere from 3 to 17, and at least 15 were deemed to be victims of child sex trafficking. The U.S. Marshal Services state that currently there are over 420,000 missing children in the U.S., and that 91% of them are runaways. Human trafficking has been generating a lot of buzz lately because of the Epstein case, because of the Pizzagate theories, and because of the rumors of the Hollywood elite pedophile rings. Before this, if you asked most people what they thought human trafficking was, they'd probably cite Taken with Liam Neeson, and it's mostly thought of as Eastern European girls or Southeast Asians or South Americans slammed into Connex containers trying to make it to America or being sold as slaves. Mostly, though, it's thought as a situation abroad. The reality for human trafficking, though, is that it occurs in the U.S. every day. Mostly it's combated by state and local authorities, and the capabilities vary from state to city. Houston, for example, has a robust counter-human trafficking team that invests in their personnel, their technology, and their capabilities. In contrast, it's larger than the entire state of New Mexico's personnel. That being said, I want to point out that the New Mexico agents are some of the most hardworking, badass individuals I've ever had the pleasure of working beside. In many situations, the trafficking victims don't realize they're being trafficked. For them, these are the cards they've been handed and this is the life they lead. Many victims are drug addicted, whether by their choice or not. Kidnapped victims are less typical than the ones that have been groomed or Romeoed and feel some sort of loyalty to their traffickers. And many times, counter to what you might think, they don't want to be rescued because you're essentially ripping them out of the life that they know and their ability to feed their addiction. It's also difficult to find and track victims and traffickers. So when I read about the success of an operation like Not Forgotten, let me tell you that they absolutely kicked and they deserve all the credit that they receive. They did a tremendous job and my hat is totally off to those officers. If you're interested in learning more about counter human trafficking or reading about more success stories, look no further than Google. This will bring you to former Delta operator George Hand. He is largely responsible for the way that counter human trafficking is done today, that victims are located and traffickers are hunted. You can also check out Tim Kennedy, who, as busy as he is, still makes time to hunt down human traffickers and absolutely ruin their lives.
And finally, in Florida woman news, a Florida woman named Nicole DeZois beat her father repeatedly in the face for farting too much. Her 59-year-old father was apparently so flatulent that Nicole couldn't take it anymore and came at him with a 3-piece and a soda. Police stated that her father's eye was bloody and battered, and also that the place smelled like a corpse had been lit on fire and put out with diarrhea. She was released without bail and told to stay away from her foul-smelling father. She asked if he could be arrested for toxic assault, but her lawyer said that was a bridge too far. And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and in a sea of insanity, try to stay cool. Remember, as always, you could get 25% off at rangerup.com using code BNN. Have a great weekend.